Hey, this is Adam Torres, and I'm here to tell you that it has never been easier to start your very own podcast. At Mission Matters, our goal is to amplify stories that matter. That means we want to help you start your podcast because your story matters. We can do this in 3 different ways. 1, join our podcast school and take a free or paid course. 2, visit our resources page where we've already figured out what you need, such as where to host your podcast. Or 3, heck, we can even do everything for you through our podcast agency, including editing for cheaper than you can do in-house. Oh, and no contracts, service is month to month. Get started by heading over to missionmatters.com and click on Start a Podcast. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Money Podcast, your source for all things money. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, today I have Olga Kirshenbaum on the line, and she's a money whisperer and founder over at Rags to Riches Consulting, and she's also a podcast host over at the 9 Minute of Creative Wisdom podcast. Olga, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Adam. I'm excited to be here.
All right, so excited to get into today's topic. So we're going to talk about the importance of starting money conversations, and I also want to get into your podcast too. I love bringing other podcasters on the show and helping them promote, and I'm excited to talk about that so my audience can go listen to your podcast also. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing over at Rags to Riches Consulting. Tell us a little bit more about your company, please.
Yes, so I work mostly with creative leaders, creative business owners, entrepreneurs, anyone who's an outside-of-the-box thinker, and I help them in 2 ways. I help them create a financial toolkit that's usually involving getting their budgets in order and figuring out how to manage the money in their lives and businesses. And then I also help people get into an abundant mindset, which the best way to summarize that is seeing opportunity where typically you may be seeing lack. And I do this in a couple of ways. I do one-on-one coaching. I also do a mastermind group. It's called the Shmoney Academy. It's basically a group learning experience for people to build a foundation for a money toolkit that works for their lives. Even though it's a group setting, typically it's whatever that will fit the person's life that's going through it. I am also, in a couple of weeks, releasing a membership platform that is actually going to be more focused on the abundance mindset and helping people kind of into that habit of seeing opportunity around them, especially in the times that we're living in right now. And of course, I start money conversations with my podcast, 9 Minutes of Creative Wisdom.
Fantastic. This is awesome. So let's just dive right into today's topic and go further. So the importance of starting money conversations. I mean, it's a big topic. Obviously, money affects us all. Where do you want to start with this one?
Absolutely. Well, I think I'd like to start with the money talk stigma that most of us grow up with. We typically grow up with the idea that it's a taboo subject. It's not polite to talk about money. And because of this money talk stigma that I like to call it, most of us don't have the tools to have the money conversations when we do become business owners or entrepreneurs, or even calling up a credit card company and asking very basic questions like, what are my benefits? Without having money conversations in your day-to-day life, you're kind of left without the tools to have the conversation. So a lot of people feel that they don't have the confidence to have the money conversation, even if it's about something basic like calling the credit card company and saying, hey, what are my benefits?
Where do you find, I mean, and obviously this won't be the same for everyone, right? So everybody has a different, history, familial background with money, all these other things. But I know certain themes tend to apply as time goes on with the more people you work with. So you've been doing this for a while now. What do you find are some of those common themes that kind of keep people back from having those correct conversations, especially as adults when they know they need to reevaluate their relationship with money overall, possibly?
Well, I think with creatives, it comes down to another generalization that I think is dangerous, that creatives and artists are meant to be serving, and that they're meant to not be able to manage their money or make any money. And I think it's a dangerous road to go down. I think that that's definitely one thing, but the other part is that most people also don't budget. I think that applies to kind of everyone outside of people who are in the creative space.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. The whole idea that it's so antiquated, and that logic was definitely, in my opinion, passed down from the whole Industrial Revolution era. I remember when I was a kid, and I was told, I liked art, I did other things, I painted all these other things, and I had a pretty successful, profitable business when I was really young, doing things in that field. And I was, and I remember going in high school, and I was kind of had to pick a major of what I wanted in high school, and I was told by the counselor, and many people, my parents included. We're just kind of thinking, well, if you want to make money, then you have to go into business. If you're okay with, not making a lot of money, then stick with your art. So that is a totally, antiquated view. Now looking back, when you think about graphic designers, all these different mediums, and if you think about social media, and you're like, if you don't have art or content or, something visually appealing, if you have that skill to do that, you can make as much money as you want to. I mean, it's totally, backwards logic nowadays. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. One of the very first guests on my podcast made a very good example. If you think about Michelangelo, the man was a brilliant businessman. He couldn't have been a starving artist, created all the masterpieces that we look at and revel in to this day.
Awesome. Let's switch it a bit, Olga. I want to go into your podcast. So 9 Minutes of Creative Wisdom podcast. First off, what was the inspiration for this?
So for me, it really goes back to what we started with, this money talk stigma. I believe that so many people are just scared to have money conversations, especially in the creative space, that I wanted to bring something to the table where it shows that it doesn't have to be so scary. It doesn't have to be so uncomfortable. Sometimes it is, and there are sometimes people who will go on the show and share very personal experiences, like how bootstrapping a business is not always fun. I bootstrap my business, so I can totally relate. But that was really the driving force for me. And the other, I make a joke of it on the podcast. They say the reason it's 9 minutes is because creatives have a short attention span.
That's so good.
But the reality is, and I love the format of your podcast. It's so simple to join as a guest, and it's also so easy to join in as a listener, especially as an entrepreneur or business owner. We're all so busy running around and doing so many things. When it is a short format, it's so much easier to digest and join the conversation. So for me, it was trying to have these somewhat serious conversations, sprinkle a little bit of fun in there, and keep it short. So that was the driving force for me there.
So this is a loaded question, Olga. I'll tell you in advance, and I ask all my podcasters this, and it's a terrible question to ask because it's like asking you to choose between your favorites or your kids, or I don't know. I don't have either. So that being said, out of all the episodes you've done, I know you're approaching 100, or maybe you just passed 100, which first off, congrats on that. Out of all of your episodes, what's one that just sticks out as something that just give my audience a feel for the flavor of the podcast, so they can go check it out? What's one that sticks out to you? Just a story, could be memorable or otherwise.
Absolutely. It's hard because I have episodes that are being recorded right now that aren't going to be aired until October. But I would say one of my favorite conversations so far has been with younger entrepreneurs. So there's two, Justin Nguyen and Max Mirho, and they are super young. They're in their 20s, and they have been able to kind of dive into this world of entrepreneurship and creating something outside of the typical 9 to 5 that most people go into after college. They are so embracing this idea of a limitless opportunity that it's honestly inspiring. And I just interviewed Max earlier today, actually, and the crazy thing about interviewing him is 2 years ago, I was trying to figure out what was I going to do, what was this journey going to look like, and I came across his profile on LinkedIn, and he ended up inspiring me. So for me, it was a little bit special to bring someone on who has inspired me on my journey, and then hearing him talk about what inspired him, and had he not had those people influencing him in his life, we may not have been able to have that conversation that we recorded today. So for me, that was a little extra special.
Oh man, that's amazing. I love those heartwarming, those little those you get the warm feeling inside type stories. I love it. I'm excited about podcast, Olga. So that being said, if somebody's listening to this and they want to connect with you and your team over at Rags to Riches Consulting or your brand overall, listen to the podcast, 9 Minutes of Creative Wisdom podcast, I mean, what's the best way for them to connect?
Absolutely. The two best ways to connect with me is my website, which is ragstorichesconsulting.com. You can find my blog posts. You can find my podcast on there. And also, I am very active on LinkedIn, and that's Olga Kirshenbaum. My headline says that I'm the money whisperer. Cannot miss it.
Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic. Well, Olga, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your background and all the great work you're doing over at Rags to Riches Consulting, and much continued success over at your podcast, 9 Minutes of Creative Wisdom podcast. To all my listeners, go check that out. Again, it's 9 Minutes of Creative Wisdom podcast. And to listeners also, thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time with us, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Money, definitely give that a subscribe, but also leave us some comments on the video. Love to know what kind of projects and things that you're working on. And Olga, thanks again for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks again, Adam. It was great to be on.